Hello and welcome to Cannaman TV. My name is Connor MacLeod. On the 21st of February 2023, the Scottish Cannabis Consortium, a collection of academics, professionals, scientists, medicinal patients and adult use consumers, met in a first of its kind event to raise awareness, education and provide an opportunity to interact directly with colleagues who are also passionate about the cannabis plant and the cannabis industry in Scotland. Over the course of 4 hours, patients shared their cannabis stories, businesses shared their cannabis visions, and innovators outlined their creative pursuit, all in collaboration for getting the best out of the wondrous plant that is cannabis. Here, you will see the essence of what was achieved, and I sincerely hope you enjoy the content and appreciate the phenomenal work produced by the organisers who are active in creating a truly vibrant cannabis industry which is emerging today in Scotland. Make sure to like and subscribe, and join me on Patreon, where you can help to build a stronger cannabis media platform. Now then, let's talk cannabis.
So, welcome. Thank you for coming. I have to say I'm feeling very overwhelmed about having you all here. This has been a really long journey for me and for Lisa and for others that have been on the road. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to introduce myself as politely as possible, and then we're going to see a bit of Lisa's story. Then we'll break for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to get you back, and we're going to start what I'd like to call cannabis speed dating, which is where I'm going to get you all on a table. We have a patient and a member of SBRG here. They're going to stay static on each table. And I'm just going to have to read the room. We might move once, we might move twice, but basically I'm going to put you on a table to begin with, and then after half an hour, 45 minutes, I'm going to say change, and you're all going to move to a different table. And when you're at that table, the patient is going to, I can't stand with the patient. The person who is representing the patient's voice is going to tell their story, and then there'll be a Q&A, and then there's an opportunity for everyone to tell their story, because the really important thing about today is that everyone in this room is involved in cannabis in some way in Scotland. And I'll build up to a wee bit, but the whole point of us doing this today, is to try and get you involved more in the cannabis environment. That's a point, and can everyone turn off their phones? As in that we add anything. So to stop me from rambling and going off topic, I've got a wee list of things I want to let you know. My name is Anna Ross. Many of you know me, some of you don't. I've been involved, I'm a lecturer at Health at the University of Edinburgh. My background is drugs policy reform and activism. I am self-confessed drug user. I've been using substances since the age of 15, and I love them. And I've had problems with them over the past. But I am here now at 43 years old, still love them. And I've been involved in medicinal cannabis movement since 2016, yeah. In regards to the drugs policy reform movement, the narrative is very much about harm. My beautiful colleague Fiona Gilbertson, who's here, Fiona? There we go. Fiona and I met many years ago and started to change the narrative around drugs policy. But anyway, 5 to 6 years ago, I came in contact with a woman called Bernadette McCready, who was a fire woman. And she'd managed to get a bunch of MSPs in a room together to talk about cannabis. And I was like, holy fuck, how did she manage that? So I got in touch with her, and we got together, and we started to communicate with politicians. At that time, Lisa Correll came on board, and the main focus for us was the medicinal cannabis reform. The reason for this was that there was a massive campaign coming up to change the law, and we really wanted to see the law change. So in 2018, the law did change to enable consultants to prescribe medicinal cannabis on the specialist registrar. Despite that, I'm sure many of you know, there have been almost no prescriptions, I don't think any in Scotland, or at least none through the NHS. And we're going to hear Lisa's story in a wee minute, but it was incredibly powerful what happened in 2018, and we thought something would change. And it hasn't really. I mean, what has happened is we now have a formal cross-party group in the Scottish Government, which is fantastic. And that was set up by Pauline McNeill, Rhoda McLeod, but ultimately it was set up by Lisa and I. We just said, get your shit together. We need this to happen, you know. So there's more to say on that topic, but I just wanted to introduce you to Lisa. So Lisa, do you want to come up? So this is Lisa Quarrell. Do you want to introduce your story and then give the wee video?
Yeah. Hi everyone. As Anna said, I'm Lisa. I am the parent of Cole Thompson, who is 10 at the moment and uses cannabis. Cole was diagnosed with epilepsy at 3 months old. He was taking 20 seizures every night and some drop seizures during the day. In 2018, Cole's seizures got incredibly worse and he lost the ability to walk and talk. And I'd had a wee boy, 6 years old, who was riding a two-wheeler bike, unaided, was mainstream education, to then very quickly he was in a wheelchair, unable to speak, couldn't eat solid food, and was told that was it. Cole had brain surgery when he was 2.5. Unfortunately it didn't work. We got 6 months of him being seizure free and then the seizures came back. So when he got so bad and ended up in the wheelchair, they said to me the only hope for Cole was a second surgery, but this time they would disconnect the left from the right side of his brain, which would leave Cole paralysed down one side and partially sighted forever. That was it. I decided to take to social media to ask for help, and everything came back as cannabis. Now, please don't judge me, because I know Anna said there's no police in the room, and I'm not anymore, but I was. For 10 years I was a police officer in Glasgow and had a very tunnel vision to what cannabis did. I believed it brought psychosis, it made you paranoid, especially young men. So when everyone mentioned cannabis, I said absolutely not. I'm not giving my son cannabis, no way. And then month after month, everybody kept saying cannabis, 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 including my own family, and so I decided to research it. And I actually decided to research it to prove everyone else wrong and me right, and kept finding that actually I was wrong and everyone else was right, and that the only positive things I could read where I was coming from were actually from pharmaceutical companies and the people that were set to gain from cannabis staying this bad demon drug that I believed it to be. So I then went to a couple of seminars in Edinburgh, one with Mike Barnes, who's here today, who was with Professor Purvey, and myself and another parent. I accessed Cole's medical records and flew to Holland. I got a prescription in Holland for Bedrolite cannabis oil, knowing that other parents had used it for their children successfully, having already have tried CBD and having only one of 5 prescriptions in Scotland for Epidiolex. They said at the time that Cole's name was picked out of a hat, which is bizarre because we'd actually, myself and my friend Monique McAdams, who's my local councillor, had taken a petition to the Scottish Parliament and won, and Cole got one of only 5 prescriptions. However, Epidiolex didn't work because it was a CBD isolate and he needed the THC. So I then decided to go to Holland. When I was in Holland, I got a prescription and smuggled it back into the country illegally. Now, as somebody who had never even had a parking ticket, it was pretty bloody terrifying, and I was risking, 14, 17 years in prison, and also because I was then giving it illegally to my child, came with extra. Now, the reason I was so set on it being medical cannabis was because as a parent, you have a responsibility that if the police and social work come knocking on your door, you want to make sure that what you've done illegally is to the best that you could. For me, it was, I wanted a prescribed medical grade cannabis so that if the game happened, I had the documents to prove what I was giving them was legit. I got Bedrolite, I flew home, Cole had been rushed into hospital, unresponsive, on the 22nd of March, and by the 26th of March, his seizures had reduced by half, and then we gave him more, and they reduced by half again. And by the 11th of April, he was back running into school. He was then, at the end of April, back on his bike. Paul now is completely seizure-free. We've had maybe about 6 seizures in 4 years. And I was speaking to somebody earlier, I think it was Ronnie, that Cole's private consultant doesn't believe that the seizures that Cole's had since he's been on cannabis are actually epileptic seizures. He takes another drug called phenytoin, the Delanton brand, which is a horrific drug, very toxic. But the NHS are refusing point blank to take him off it because they don't recognise cannabis as a medicine, even though legally they can prescribe it, they don't recognise it. So the Delanton, believe it or not, one of the side effects is seizures. If it's too high or too low, it causes seizures. So the seizures that Cole's had since starting cannabis have looked nothing like the seizures he had prior. And that is why the private consultant believes that actually the seizures that Cole's had are epileptic seizures that are probably because of the phenytoin. So today Cole is, well, he's actually on school today because he's been in Skyver. In my words, he was a wee shit. He knew his mum had the day off today and was coming to an event to do his medicine, so he decided he wanted to hang about with me, although I was all the way halfway through Edinburgh and the school phoned. So he's at my mum's having toast and beans, but he's fine. He's in mainstream education. He is at Taekwondo. He just graded a couple of months ago. He does Taekwondo 3 times a week. He's very much like every other 10-year-old. He has development delays because of the 6 years of his life where the seizures basically took over his brain and he couldn't function. And now I've got my boy back, and cannabis is, and I know probably some people will frown at me here, but it's our miracle medicine. And I know a lot of people don't say medical, but it's our miracle. Cole had tried 20 different pharmaceutical medicines by the time he was 6. He did brain surgery, nothing worked. And the minute he gets put on full whole plant medical cannabis, boom, seizure free. And everything has completely changed for my life because it was mainly through the night, and it was, he's got a brother, my oldest son's 13, and it was, our world was upside down. So yeah, it's been a miracle. And we'll show you a video of Cole's story and you'll see the magnificent change in him. Thank you.
He's got a couple of words he just wants to say.
Thank you for the hospital for saving me.
From East Kilbride is 6 years old. His mum, Lisa Cornell, is desperately trying to find a cure for the crippling epileptic seizures that leave Cole paralysed and unable to speak.
Mummy.
Hi guys, it's me, Cody, and I was just in the gaming van, and it was on the 10th of
So that gets me every time. The fucking bastards!
Some of their parents are married.
You know, sorry. But we've been working on this for how many years? 4.5 years. And despite this, despite knowing what's happened, Cole's consultant refuses to prescribe cannabis-based medicine. Oh God, that made me really emotional. Yeah, so we wanted to play that. I know everyone's got a different story, but it's just to sort of understand where this anger is coming from, and we all have it. Understand how much life could be shifted by this medicine, and really to start to think about how we in this room can shift the narrative. Because one thing that we need to know and we need to remember is that cannabis medicine is the oldest medicine known to man. It was prescribed up until 1971 in Britain for over 100 different ailments. We have our own sort of historical legend here, Linda. And I was going to ask Linda just to give us a couple of minutes rundown on the historical element of cannabis in Scotland.
That's without any preparation time. Sorry. Some years ago there was an archaeological dig at Sutra, which my mother actually took me to. And at that dig they found cannabis in the soil. And it was a dig on a medieval monastery. And the medieval monastery had used cannabis, obviously, for something. And then there were two other digs in Fife, at the Black Loch and Kilcocker Loch, where hemp and cannabis were found in the soil stratus. So we do have a lot of historical evidence for cannabis being used in Scotland in the medieval period and before and after. The only problem is that it didn't always set seed, and the monks had to bring seed from other parts of the country or from Europe. And then if you go to the, what's the Surgeons Museum called?
Surgeons Hall.
Yes, Surgeons Hall. They have some cannabis, books that have cannabis in them from way back. So I think that's all I'll say just now.
Thank you, Linda.
And I'm sure many of you have a wealth of knowledge inside of you about what goes on in cannabis in Scotland. And this is really what we're wanting to do, because let me give a little bit of background about the SCC and what we are here. So we've started up the cross-party medicinal cannabis. We've got that. We've got a truly cross-party, which is we've got Pauline McNeill, who's Labour. We've got Lorna MacLeod, who's SNP. And we've got Oliver Mundell. God, stop. I can't help it. So, one thing, well, yeah, my political affiliation is clear. Trying to be as all-encompassing and as involve as many voices as possible. And actually, to be fair, the Scottish Tories have probably been one of the best supporters. I mean, with our original meeting, which was informal, we had Brian Whittle, who is the Shadow Secretary for Health, and he he was very impressed with us, and he even wrote to Theresa May to say, I met a bunch of stakeholders and I believe that medicinal cannabis is something we should do. So, we were grateful for him. But anyway, point is, we have this cross-party group, and we meet 3 or 4 times a year, and we're now into the second parliamentary session, and so we've been setting up the themes. But the reality is, it's me and Lisa, and we have a patient subgroup, but we haven't actually galvanised much. And so one of the real main outcomes that we want from today and going forward is to gather more people on board in order to get involved in the cross-party. And the reason is this, is that in Scotland we have a cannabis community, we have everyone involved, we have beautiful local industries, we have a lot of voices that need to be heard. We have a blank slate. I mean, I'm not too sure. I was hopeful that we were going to get independence next year, but now I think the Conservatives are setting down. I have no idea. It's all up in the air. But the reality is, Westminster, sorry, Ronnie, I know you're down there fighting the good fight, but Westminster's not going to make the shift that we need. So there's options here, In Scotland, there is flexibility to a certain extent. And what I really want us to do is just change the narrative. Instead of this idea that somehow this is a new medicine and the rest of the world are kind of moving with the times, and in Scotland we need to go with this new idea. We need to remember that this is our medicine. We use it, many of us use it on a daily basis, for well-being, for fun, for pleasure, for medicinal, for all sorts. But there are voices here that need to count, and we need to feed in to the Scottish Government. So the thing is, we have a feed-in mechanism now. We have a feed-in mechanism. I have agreement from the ministers that we have 3 members of the Scottish Government, the civil servants, 1 from agriculture, 1 from health, and 1 from drugs policy. And they're named contacts that we have who will directly engage with the cross-party. We have direct links. We've had very good engagement with Alison Strath from the the Chief Pharmaceutical Officer, and we've had really fruitful conversations with the Chief Scientist's Office and the NRS Scotland, and things like that. So everything's in place, but what we don't have is the team. We don't have the large group of voices needing to look at all the different elements of regulation, whether it's regulation under the current system or regulation under a different system. And that's what I'd really like you guys to think about as we traverse around the tables, is how are we going to join this together to make a team? Through the SCC, the Scottish Cannabis Consortium, it doesn't really exist at the moment. At the moment we have, I've been talking and all of that, so we'll just go up here. Here we go. So I set up the Scottish Cannabis Consortium about a year ago with funding from the University of Edinburgh. I set up 2 organisations. It was the Scottish Psychedelic Research Group, which is one of the organisations that is putting this event on. And we've got a team, and that's great, and that's actually been going. And for those of you that were here yesterday, we felt the vibe in the room, we're going to run with it. But I also set up the Scottish Cannabis Consortium in the knowledge that the Scottish Government will not engage on cannabis in a proper way unless there is an organisation there that is representing the voices of cannabis people, the cannabis community. So we can all get involved with the Scottish Government with their own little emails. I'm sure many of you have your own contacts that you engage with it from time to time. But in order for real change to happen, we need to create a consortium or some kind of organisation that can provide a collective voice to present the narrative, to present the story to the Scottish Government, and they'll then run with it. Because having worked within government policy, and having worked with policymakers for many years now, they need a story. I mean, I think you all know, hopefully by now, that life is a collection of stories, and that everything that we do is a narrative in our head about what has been and what may go before. And in regards to the Scottish Government, they don't want to deal with this. They've got their story. Cannabis is a UK issue, we're not going to deal with it. We've got these medical patients. And we need to present them with a new story. A story that is just as powerful and just as strong and just as coherent. So it's all very well for me emailing the government going, set up a unit. But they wouldn't know what to do with the unit because they don't have a narrative, they don't understand where they're coming from, they don't even know what the goals or the aims are. So I'm going to give a wee presentation at the end, but just to think about, as you go into these tables, this is about community creating, and we want to create networks and connections and really focus on what it is that we're trying to get here. And what I would say that the SCC is trying to get is we're trying to get an equitable and just approach to cannabis with human rights as its fundamental basis. Now, I was going to give you 5 minutes break, but I don't want to get the chat started again until you're actually at your tables. So instead, I'll just make sure I've covered everything. Yeah, and anything I haven't covered, I'll cover next. Oh, one thing really important. We're filming. So, anyone who doesn't want their face on the film, please raise your hand now. Really, Alex?
I had no idea.
So we've got 2 filmmakers here. We've got Drug Reporter, they're a European drug policy activist reform group. They're going to be making us a wee half-hour documentary on the whole events as it is. So it's going to be shown online. It's not going to be media as such, but it will be available for mainly the drug policy reporters and people like that. And to evidence, we're wanting to evidence and show it to the ministers, to show that we do actually have a lot of people who want to get involved in cannabis and psychedelics. So that's one. And then we have Cameraman TV up here. The podcast, wonderful podcast, you can have a look at them. And he's going to be filming and creating a little sort of short podcast of today. So, and that'll be shown on Cameraman TV. So raise your hands now if you don't want your face on camera. Are you sure, John? No, I didn't think so. Right, brilliant. You're all in. Okay, so what we're going to do is the way it's going to work is I'm going to put you on tables, and then we're going to have a wee meditation, and then we're going to start again. So I'm going to read out your names. The issue I've got is that there's people here that signed up to the Eventbrite that didn't turn up, and there's people who didn't sign up to the Eventbrite on my participant list that did turn up. So there might be folk that are left a bit stranded, but what we'll do, it feels a bit chaotic, but I'm trying to explain what we're going to do here. You see, when you create energy, and when you create kind of sort of movement, you also create change, you know? So the reason for getting you all moving around and talking to each other is to get that fire going and that energy going. So you can then take that energy and move it and turn it into something concrete and real. And so we shall begin. It'd be wonderful if you had cannabis social clubs, ethical growing. A lot of this stuff is already starting and a lot of it is already happening. And my vision, our vision, is to use the SCC as a way of enacting policy change by using the knowledge and experience and expertise of everyone who engages in this group. And this can happen by two ways. So basically in Scotland, as you probably know, cannabis is not legal. It's controlled by the UK. We have a weird legal situation where if you have a prescription, it's a Schedule B, which means it's medicinal. If you don't have a prescription, it's a Schedule 1, which means it's got no health benefits whatsoever. It's amazing. It's like alchemy in action. It changes from harmful to non-harmful depending on the context. Is it a wave? Is it a particle? Who the fuck knows? So it's both, exactly. Well, I'm going to utilise that imagery as well for us to really think about the fact that we're here, we have this opportunity to change the narrative. So here I've done just a very simple morning graph. You've got the SCC. The idea is I want to get working groups in the SCC. And there are two avenues that we can affect immediate, or at least quite quick change. One is through the Health Improvement Scotland. So I don't know if all of you know, but health is a devolved matter. And it's governed by Health Improvement Scotland. And we have, I've got another slide that shows them all, but we have two institutions within Health Improvement Scotland that are really important for the cannabis. One is SIGN, Scottish Intercollegiate Guidance Network, whatever, and SMC, the Scottish Medicines Consortium. I think that is, they changed the C to something else. The point is, these are the ones that provide the guidance on prescribing. At the moment, clinicians in Scotland are using NICE guidance. But as Lisa and I found out when we tried to take NICE to a judicial review, we don't have any legal standing in Scotland, so we can't challenge the NICE guidance. So the only way that we can get guidance that is implementable and challengeable in Scotland is through SIGN. And we also have SMC. Now, what I wanted to propose, so we had a presentation from the women who run SIGN, or Health Improvement Scotland, or one of them who does the evidence reviews. And they are more than happy and more than willing to engage with us on looking to review cannabis-based medicine guidance. We just need the team to do it. And I'm suggesting that we get two teams together, or they can cross-party. But one team which is to look at developing the evidence base for pain, cancer, MS, nausea, and eczema, which are the conditions that NICE also cover too. So, you know, we're covering our backs, we're playing the game. You know, but what we're going to do is, unlike in England, where NICE used, I think it was for epilepsy, they had 1,500 research papers, and they only chose 3, I think it was, 3 to make their recommendations on, which quite frankly is bullshit. So, what we want to do, and they've spoken about it, we have an opportunity in Scotland. Scotland has what's called a realistic medicine policy. It's implemented by the Scottish Government. It's this idea that there's a dialogue between the patient and the practitioner, and that any form of medicine is given with this dialogue. And the idea is it widens up the remit of evidence. When we heard from Angela Robertson, I think her name is, from SIGN, she was fully in agreement that we can use a wider range of evidence, including the voice of users when they make that decision. So there's a real major opportunity. The second one is for SMC. So SIGN deal with conditions, and they make recommendations for prescribable conditions. SMC deals specifically with drugs. And the one we really want to do, and this is specifically for Lisa and her campaign, is we really want to get bedroll-like cannabis as an option for Scottish patients on the Scottish NHS formulary. And that is also doable, because we have links with the people that provide the bedroll-light, we have all of that in place. The Scottish Government already have a dialogue with bedroll-light. So really, all it is that we need to get a group of people together to, once again, develop the evidence base, or gather the evidence base, and set up it's called I've just forgotten the name. Anyway, it's a patient company review, basically. And there's a whole bunch of processes that you go through. It's quite complicated. But the reality is, if we get the team together, you're talking 2 to 3 years, we could have cannabis-based medicine prescribable for pain, cancer, MS, nausea and eczema, because there's a lot of evidence to support cannabis on those conditions. And we could potentially have bedrolite for treatment-resistant epilepsy for children in Scotland. They're doable. They're really fucking doable. But we just need everyone to start doing it. Because I can't. I've got a 35-hour job and 2 children and a life, and it's tiring. So I need all of you to do it. So that's one. That's one avenue. The other avenue is if we want to start looking at, so we can't change the law, but we can play with the law. Oh yes. Because the law is creative, and a little-known fact that the majority of cannabis offences can be dealt with by a fine rather than conviction. And indeed in Scotland at the moment, all cannabis possessions are allegedly dealt with by a fine. But one fundamental aspect that just blew my brain when I came across this statistic is that, and it blew my brain in the sense that I knew it was true, but I was like, fucking hell, I still don't see it. When you look at the statistics for cannabis possession, the majority of people getting arrested for cannabis possession are young men between the ages of 18 and 24 years old, either in parks or in someone's house. And, of course, to top it off, if the majority is in areas of lower deprivation or lower socioeconomic development. You know, so we're dealing with a stigmatization of a group of people in society, a targeting of a group of people in society, you know, and that's not to begin to all the damage that's been done anyway. I won't go into it, but you really need to hold that in your minds there, you know. And the only way to get the policing changed, so currently, even with the possession charge, people are still getting charged with cannabis use. The only way with the CAN card, unfortunately, the police will not engage with it in the way that it's meant to be engaged with. It doesn't work unless you have a legal prescription, so we're not catching everyone. The way to deal with the legal side of it is a Lord Advocate's reference. And the Lord Advocate needs to be convinced that in Scotland, it is not in the public interest to police the cultivation or possession of cannabis. And once again, that's totally doable. You know, you've got a human rights argument, you've got a social justice argument, you've got an equity argument, you've got all sorts of arguments. We just need to get the papers together and the team together to present it. I've already had discussions. Craig's not here, so I'm allowed to tell you. Already had discussions with 2 of those out of 3 of those people, and they agree. You know, so it's kind of everything's ready to go behind the scenes.
Thanks to the Scottish Cannabis Consortium, and thanks to you for sticking around until the end of the video. I sincerely hope you enjoyed the content. I'll see you next time.